We arrived at Heathrow Airport at 6:30 a.m. on the 26th of March 2000 and were to spend the next 2 days in London before embarking on our tour of Britain. Arriving at the Kensington Palace Hotel alongside Kensington Gardens, we booked our luggage in, and as we could not get into our room until later that day, set out to explore this great city. We were fortunate to find a London tour bus only a street away, which soon had us riding into the heart of the city. Judy studied the map of the way to the major attractions.
Crossing over the Thames on London Bridge, we were able to get a good view of Tower Bridge downstream. To our left was Tower Pier and Custom House. Soon after, we turned onto Tower Bridge, built in 1894 by Sir John Wolfe Barry. The two towers house the machinery for the lifting gear to raise the bascules.
On leaving the bus, we decided to visit the Tower of London, entering through the Byward Tower. Inside, we were met by the yeoman warders and waited to see if it would be convenient to be escorted around by one of these guides.
I'm one of the 38 yeoman warders here at the Tower of London. What people often refer to us here. It'll be my privilege this morning to take you around. Hopefully we're going to be together for about an hour or so.
For a short time we walked with a group, but soon found it too hard to hear over the crowd noise and decided to look around the tower on our own.
As we walked down Water Lane, we were impressed by how well fortified the tower was against attack. Not only was there an outer wall, but the buildings on the other side of the lane offered a considerable defence as well. On the way, we came across a few old cannons displayed in the lane. A pair of these were probably cast by John Fuller of Heathfield, Sussex, and proved at Woolwich in July 1747. They were part of a series intended for the Irish government.
Passing through Henry III's Watergate, we found ourselves entering the central focus of this famous complex. Many buildings make up the Tower of London. In the centre we found the White Tower. Begun in the 11th century in the reign of William the Conqueror, this tower marked the beginning of the history of the Tower of London. The White Tower held much armoury of bygone days. A notice drew our attention to a small portion of stone foundations, the remains of the Roman city wall of London.
Across the Tower Green is the Queen's House. As well as being a fortress, at one time the tower served as a royal residence. Behind the White Tower is the Waterloo Block, housing the crown jewels and much of the regalia used for state occasions. To the right of the Waterloo Block is the Fusiliers Museum.
Looking south past the Lanthorn Tower is Tower Bridge. The bridge piers are of steel construction encased in brickwork. The trees did not obscure the view at this time of the year, as they were bare of leaves. Beyond the tower and to the north is the Tower Hill Memorial.
Leaving the Tower of London, we took a short launch trip up the Thames to a berth just beyond Waterloo Bridge. HMS Belfast, a Southampton-class cruiser built in 1939 and now obsolete, lies between Tower and London bridges. The ship last saw action in the Korean campaign in 1952. We passed the paddle steamer Dixie Queen and a number of majestic old buildings of quite interesting architecture. We also cruised past the Fishmongers' Hall, the livery hall of the Fishmongers' Company. To our left was a replica of Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, built by Sam Wanamaker on the original site.
Against the skyline, the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral appeared to be travelling along with us. After cruising past several more old buildings, we passed Cleopatra's Needle. First erected in Egypt around 1500 BC, the needle was presented to the British people in 1819. Leaving the cruise, we spotted the London Eye on the opposite bank of the Thames. Standing 135 metres high, this observation wheel is the largest in the world, having 32 capsules, each with the capacity to hold 25 people.
Walking from the Thames to Trafalgar Square, we observed a number of statues along the way. By the time we arrived at Trafalgar Square, the day was extremely overcast, silhouetting Nelson's column against a dark sky. Tourists and the usual pigeons were in abundance.
Next morning, we walked onto Westminster Bridge to get a good look at the Houses of Parliament and Big Ben. The present Parliament buildings were designed by Charles Barry. Big Ben, the bell, is named after Sir Benjamin Hall, the first Commissioner of Works at the time it was hung. Built between 1840 and 1867, these buildings have been home to the House of Commons and the House of Lords ever since.
At Westminster Abbey, we saw it would take some time to enter the building, as the queue at the Great West Door was quite long. Sir Christopher Wren is reputed to have designed the western towers of the Abbey, which were completed in 1745. Setting off down Birdcage Walk and across the end of St James Park, we headed towards Buckingham Palace. An expanse of lawns and garden beds flanked the end of the mall in front of the Queen Victoria Memorial.
The Victoria Monument, designed by Aston Webb in 1911, stands tall at the front entrance of Buckingham Palace. We could find nothing to explain the variety of figures on the monument, except to note that Victoria was known as Queen of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, and from 1876, Empress of India. She was the first monarch to occupy Buckingham Palace just after she came to the throne in 1837. In the 1820s, John Nash had become known as an inspired town planner, and it was he who began converting Buckingham House into a palace for George IV. The front of the palace faces the Mall and was refaced in 1912.
We left the palace via the Mall and entered St James Park, spending time slowly strolling in the direction of Admiralty Arch. The park is a reserve for wildfowl. Being in the heart of the city is a popular place for office workers to relax in their lunch hour. St James Park was transformed from marshy land into a deer park by Henry VIII and later extended and laid out as a pleasure garden by Charles II and rearranged in 1827 to 1829 in accordance with designs by John Nash. An abundance of birdlife and other wildlife could be found in the park, which together with other parks in this area stretch in an irregular belt for nearly 3 miles between Whitehall and Kensington. The quiet tranquility of the park, the birdlife and the brightly coloured flower beds afforded a quiet respite in this busy city.
Leaving the park, we made our way to the end of the Mall and paused for a few minutes to take in Admiralty Arch. Passing through the arch, we faced Nelson's Column, surrounded by some very heavy afternoon traffic at Trafalgar Square. The London Underground was opened in 1863. Known as the Tube, it is one of the largest systems of its kind in the world. There are over 270 stations, and most journeys between central destinations can be completed with no more than 1 or 2 changes along the way. It was now late in the afternoon, and we had done quite a lot of walking that day. Charing Cross Station was nearby, so we took the Underground back to our hotel.